Oh, no. No big box for us. No big box. No big box for us.
Yeah, I was gonna, your talk suggested I give that a drive-by, taking up the east side of I-5.
Yeah.
Which is improved, so, and you're a developer landlord, so you would be able to add anything.
Port commissioner too.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
in addition to planning commissioner, he's also on the port
Okay.
commission, so that's
You guys-
port's property
Yeah.
that I was telling you about.
Right, right, okay.
So this might be a good after meeting conversation to see if there's some magic happen there.
You guys do any manufacturing or anything like that, or is it just warehouse specs?
I just didn't have anything better to do.
We
I just wanted to hang out with us.
Yeah, I thought, hey man, if they have.
See you the last couple meetings.
Yeah.
Someplace you
We've
can.
got 24 ground leases.
Sit down before I get myself in trouble.
Yep.
And here's something new.
Oh, this is Maylene. Not Maylene,
we got the number.
Maylene, yeah.
We did a, we did a deal with the Port of Pekin.
Yeah, she's at the exact spot.
Built a manufacturing
Exactly.
for what is now
that's nice.
growing.
She does the permit stuff.
Okay, hopefully she'll
But yeah,
do a
that
little
was
better
a-
job.
Ladies and gentlemen, you want to have a seat? We can go ahead and proceed with our hearing.
Yes, excuse me.
Start the recording.
No, I was gonna,
All right.
thank you.
On this computer or to the cloud? Okay. I know I asked.
Recording in progress.
That's a good sign. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call to order this hearing of February 28, 2024, in the matter of WLD 2023-019, Trammell Crow Industrial Development. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the city's hearings examiner. I'll start with some brief announcements and a summary of the process that will follow, so everyone understands how you can participate in the hearing today. I start by saying I am not a city employee. I am licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner. Little echo in here. I just realized that's me. Sorry. I'm licensed as an attorney, trained as a planner. I serve under contract to City Council. I say that so you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application before me today. My role as the hearings examiner is to conduct public hearings excuse me, and make decisions about certain land use matters in the city of Woodland. In making those decisions, I am required to apply the city's existing laws. I'm not a policy maker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with City Council and Planning Commission to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings examiner, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker. I believe I am unbiased with regard to the application before me today. I have not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But anyone has the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Procedure will follow. I'll start by asking staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the city's website. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the staff report. Then anyone else who wants to testify about this application may do so in support, in opposition, or with questions or concerns. Once everyone's had an initial opportunity to testify, I'll give staff and the applicant alone an opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If those responses include any new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence. Otherwise, I'll close the public portion of the hearing and announce what I'm going to do. I just realized it's closed captioning below me. Movement on my computer screen. Generally, I will issue a written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the record. I'll send my decision to the city. The city will send it to parties of record, so anybody who testifies orally or in writing before the close of the record will be sure and receive a copy of my decision when it's issued. If anybody wants to receive a copy but you choose not to testify, you can ask staff to put you on the list to get a copy when it's issued. When you testify, if you're here in person, please come on up to the podium. Everybody, please, whether online or in person, please begin by stating your name your full mailing address. Please spell your last name so I get it right. And if you represent someone else, please say so. Testimony should be relevant to the applicable approval criteria which are set out in the staff report. For those who are online, if you want to testify, you can indicate that by clicking on my screen. It's on the bottom. There's a reactions button there which just went away. There we go. Click on that little hand icon. Raise your hand icon will appear. Click on that and a hand icon will appear next to your name. We'll take testimony from online people based on the raised hands. If you're online and when I call your name, please unmute yourself. Go ahead and give your you state your name and mailing address. Give us your testimony. When you're done testifying, please mute yourself again and click on the raised hand button again so that goes away. We know you had the chance to testify. But like I said, if you're here in person, please come on up to the podium and we'll do it that way. But that concludes my introduction. Mr. Goddard or Ms. Garcia DeBoard? Who's doing the hearing, the staff report today? Whoever's doing it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Examiner. My name is Travis Goddard. I'm the Community Development Director. And for the record, I'm joined by the clerk, Amanda Hogan, for the hearing, and the project planner for this, who is Maylene Garcia DeBoard. And so she may be available to answer questions if anything comes up for you. But I'll be doing the presentation tonight or today. The case before you tonight is the Trammell Crow Woodland Industrial Site. It is a Type 2 site plan review with a critical area permit. The reason why it's before you tonight is because it is a major variance request for the habitat buffer setback. So that's why the entire package is before you today in accordance with city code. The proposal is 2 industrial buildings, approximately 931,000 square feet. They indicate that there will be up to 4 separate tenant spaces per building and 2 potential phases. Each building could be built as a separate phase. So there isn't necessarily a one before the other. It may all be built at the same time. They're just ensuring that they have the option of doing it in 2 phases. So the site plan itself is on the screen before you. It includes 546 parking spaces, trailer storage, 191 loading docks. They will be extending Roseway on the west side, the entire length of the project, and it'll be at least a half-street road improvement for a new construction. They will also be looking at North Pekin road frontage improvements on the east side, and it'll be a half-street road reconstruction with curb gutter and sidewalk, which is not currently there. And it does include the parcel that's kind of in the southeast corner. It is known as 345 North Pekin, but it is not part of the site plan. It is a boundary line adjustment parcel that has been removed from the original application. The location is, as indicated in this aerial photograph, it is identified as 345 North Pekin because that's what the application address was when it came in, but that address has since been boundary line adjusted out. It is it is zoned light industrial I1, and the permitted uses that they are looking at under Woodland Municipal Code could be anything that's a permitted use under that code section, which generally includes warehousing, storage, and distribution centers, including freight handling terminal. Although once the buildings are built, there is no limit on the type of use that could go into the building. So provided they need to do any kind of post-decision review or additional impact fee payment, it would be based on their use and how they manage the trips that are set aside under the existing site plan. The development standards that apply to this site, and that is 25-foot front yard setbacks, 10-foot side yard, and a 10-foot rear yard. Height limitation of 55 feet to the eave height if the property is higher or larger than 1 acre in size. The reason why this is relevant is they currently have a property line from the current budget boundary line adjustment that does split the building, and they've indicated that when they figure out exactly what the final alignment is going to be, they will apply for another boundary line adjustment, and they can do that at any point before they construct the building. So there's no pressure for them to do that prior to site plan approval. To approve, the site plan approval criteria is essentially laid out in code, and it includes landscaping, screening, parking, frontage improvement, and critical areas. And the critical area permit itself has generally, there's a tiered approach to reviewing critical areas, and primarily you want to start with avoidance and minimization and then move on to mitigation, and in this case it's repair, restoration, preservation or maintenance, compensation, and then monitoring on the back end. The reason why that's relevant for this site is because they do have Oregon white oaks, which are protected species. One of them has been identified for removal, and it's 587 square feet of impacted drip line, and they are proposing mitigation for that. There's also multiple wetlands on the site. Two of them are regulated, and the smaller ones, C, D, and E, they are wetlands, but they are not regulated under the habitat ordinance, and so they will be impacted, and they have a mitigation plan for all of those. The variance itself is they are proposing a buffer from wetland B to go from 200 feet to 21 feet at its smallest width. It is identified in both the critical areas permit and the site plan, and the applicant has submitted a critical area report and mitigation plan prepared by Ecological Land Services, and I'll let the applicant get into that, but that information is in the record. They are proposing mitigation, which is to enhance the buffer with Oregon white oak, shrubs, logs, woody debris pile, and vertical snags, bird nests, and bat houses. And they're also going to do some mitigation bank purchases of credits, and that's laid out in the site plan. You can see that the site photos, it is currently in active agriculture, and it is pretty much flat as a pancake. You can see in these photos that these are the various mitigation, but regardless of the angle that you look at, it's pretty nondescript, flat piece of property. And this is viewed from North Pekin, the road that currently exists. You can see it in the foreground, and it is not built to current industrial standards, and that's the road that's going to be approved on the east side. Staff recommendation is that the proposal meets the woodland code, and we recommend approval with conditions. And so if you have any questions for us, we'd be more than happy to.
Just want to clarify, as far as Pekin Road improvements, you said they're going to look at improvements on Pekin Road. You mean they are going to improve Pekin Road, have frontage improvements, but what exactly the extent of that hasn't exactly been determined?
They are, yep, and that'll be hammered out at final engineering. I meant on the photos you're looking at the frontage improvements.
I
that
thought
need
when you
to be
were
done.
initially mentioned Pekin Road, I thought you said they're looking at improvements too. But I
Sorry.
figured that's what you meant. But
As conditioned, they
Yes.
are looking at doing those.
They are going to do those.
Yep.
Okay. And did you also say it's going to extend along the boundary, the southeast chunk
Yes.
that's not part of the site? They are going to improve that?
Yep, so they have a contractual agreement to do the frontage improvements along the existing, it's the original Bozarth farmhouse.
What was the tax lot number on? Do you remember? If you don't know offhand, it's okay. I know exactly which one it is, and I can see it from the bigger
Yep.
plans.
Sorry, it is removed from here, and I don't have it on
That's
the
okay.
presentation.
I know exactly where it is, and I just wanted to get it in my note.
Okay,
Okay, I don't have any other questions at this point. Thank you.
thank you.
Is the applicant here represented?
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. My name is Todd Johnson. I'm here today with TRJ Planning, and I'm representing the applicant, Trammell Crow. We also have our full team either online or here in person if you have any questions specific to any of the disciplines that contributed to the application. I'm going to keep it pretty brief today. We agree with the staff report in its entirety, the findings and the conclusions in the staff report. There is one clarification that we would ask the examiner to make in the final conditions of approval, and this relates to condition 4. It's on page 16 of 19, and it relates to impact fees.
Okay.
Condition 4 is that the impact fees be paid when building permits are issued. In this case, the applicant intends on building the shell first,
Building the shell?
the shell only,
Okay.
with no tenants involved, and it's basically, if you're not familiar with shell-only construction, it's basically just that. It's
Just a
building the
wall.
outer walls of the building and roofing it and the flooring and all that, so that will require a building permit. But none of the impacts related to the impact fees are attributed to that. It's just simply building an empty building, and then following that, they'll lease up space, and they'll have to come in for building permits for tenant improvements for each of the spaces inside the buildings as they're developed. The tenant improvements are more accurately tied to the impacts that the fees are intended to mitigate for. So we would just ask that that condition be clarified to either allow the flexibility to pay those impact fees at the time of a tenant improvement, building permit, or occupancy, as number 3 down there suggests, that the Director of Public Works can also defer that to occupancy. But just to specify that we're talking about paying impact fees at the time of the TI permit, and not
Tenant improvement.
the tenant improvement permit, and not at the time of the initial shell-only building permit.
Okay.
That more closely aligns with the impacts. Other than that, we completely agree and accept staff's findings, conditions, and if you have any questions for the applicant, like I said, we're all here, so we'd be happy to address any questions that you had. If you had any, as you were reviewing the file, if you had any questions about anything or you'd like us to respond to that.
I don't have, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the room who'd like to say anything about this application in support, opposition, or with questions? Is there anybody online who'd like to say something? I understand we do have some people online, I'm just not sure.
Hi, this is Jennifer Ray Keene. I wanted to make a comment.
Okay, can I get your address and the spelling of your last name?
The last name is WRAY-KEENE,
Thank you.
and I am the executive director of the Port of Woodland, and our address is 1608 Guild Road.
Oh, I always thought it was Guild. Thank you for the correction.
We got a lecture from the family when we opened the orchard. So we submitted our comments to the city, and we are in full support of this development. It is linked right behind our property at the Roseway Industrial Park at 1570 Roseway. Part of the infrastructure that the port invested in over the last couple of years was the start of Roseway for further industrial development. We have been in close contact with Trammell Crow on this development, reviewed the documents, and we're in full support.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody else online who'd like to say anything about this application? If so, please raise your hand. There we go, got the right screen now. And I am not seeing anybody with their hand raised. So going once, twice, nobody wants to say anything. Anything further from the city? And specifically regarding condition 4, the proposed amendments?
So this issue was brought up by the applicant prior to issuance of the staff report, and we specifically added 3 to that, and unfortunately we might have made a mistake on the RCW reference, but the RCW does allow for the city to defer, and the intention of section 3 was to allow the applicant to propose a deferral to occupancy permit. And so that would allow them, whether they do 1 tenant space or 4 tenant space, that they would be responsible up to the estimated trip generation. And then we would, if they did 1 building and it had a high trip generator, that they could use up all of their reserved trips as with that single user, and then they could come back and do, say, a type 1 site plan, post-decision site plan, that would allow them to expand to do some additional trip generation, and we could calculate that as part of the site plan, because the physical site plan wouldn't be affected, but the trip generation and the conditions of approval and mitigation might be something that we could handle with the simple administrative site plan to add additional trip capacity and recalculate impact fees at the time of any additional tenant information is provided.
So you think sub 3 of condition 4 addresses the applicant's concerns adequately?
Yes, because
Okay.
and the other thing I had mentioned, I think in an email to them, was as part of the final engineering, we could work out some notes on the face of the plat, specifically addressing the phasing and occupancy or postponement till occupancy. We're willing to do that on the face of the final engineering documents, because we can handle clarification as part of that.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, anything further from the applicant?
No,
Okay.
sir.
Do you agree with the city's analysis that 4 sub 3 is adequate too?
I do see that, but my concern is that there's no mention of the tenant improvement process, but we wouldn't be seeking occupancy until after tenant improvements
Sure.
anyway. The building will be finalized for shell only, but won't be approved for occupancy. That gives the city the ability to defer those until occupancy, so I think that could work.
Okay, good. You guys are more familiar with this issue than I am as far as the procedural issue. So if you guys are good with it, I have no issue.
Unfortunately, it's an important nuance because,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
we
I-
don't want to have to pay a bunch of impact fees before we get tenants on board that will ultimately be responsible for their own impacts.
No,
So
I absolutely see the issue for the applicant's viewpoint is just this if this is
it's
procedurally good enough, it's good enough for me.
it's close enough. It might be better if we could insert, you know, just the opportunity to defer those until tenant improvement occupancy or something of that sort. It would be more clear to me that that was allowed. Right now, they're allowed to defer to occupancy. But
So if we just put under 3, director to allow for collection of TIF fees at final inspection or building occupancy approval, would it be building tenant occupancy approval if we added that?
I think it's fine.
Okay,
The way
okay.
it's probably fine, though. It's getting pretty down into the weeds to
Yeah.
think about it otherwise.
Okay.
We're not
good.
going to occupy the building before that, so.
Okay.
And at
Thank
this
you.
point, we're willing to go on the record that we will try to give as much flexibility as the RCW and the WMC allows.
You said there was maybe a typo with the RCW.
Yes, so it's supposed to be 82 point something something, not 00.
Okay.
I just don't know that number off the top of my head.
I can probably look it up. And
Thank you.
I will fix it. So.
And I want to say it's even quoted in the WMC, but don't quote me on that. I was trying to look that up and ran out of time.
Okay, I'll try and track it down. So with that, I will close the hearing and the record, and based on the findings in the staff report, this application does or will comply with the approval criteria. So I'll approve it subject to the conditions of approval in the staff report. I will with that fixed to that one RCW site, and that concludes our hearing. Thank you.